So you either keep him on life support or you basically choose end of life. To make that decision about your father is the most fucked up experience that any kid or anyone should have to go through. Whenever I think about that, I just get so emotional because it's like there's nothing I could do to help him in that situation. Well, that culminated into something quite, I'd call it a breakdown. I'll be honest, Harrison, that was the lowest I've been in my entire life. I just immersed myself in exercise, like probably having too much to drink. I was sitting at my dad's bedside responding to Slack messages. What the hell am I doing? Like, this is something needs to change. It's honestly just first step is just acknowledging that you're going through that, because then you can start putting together a plan. There's no time like the present. There's no guarantee that I'll be here tomorrow. Like, let me just do what I can now. I'm such an advocate of everyone having that one thing on the side that gives them purpose. You need that exterior passion project, whatever that looks like to you. It's something that gives you that additional drive. It's so important. We've always said if we can just help one person feel a little less alone, then that's great.
Pain can either break a man or forge him into someone stronger. In this one, Matteo Kotch joins us as he opens up about the experiences that shaped him, from bullying and insecurity growing up in South Africa to the devastating loss of his father and the breakdown that followed. Together, we explore grief, self-worth, masculinity, mental health, and how becoming a man often begins at the point you take responsibility for your healing. This one is about resilience, emotional honesty, and learning how to keep moving forward when life hits you more than you thought you could carry. If you've ever struggled with self-doubt, loss, anxiety, or finding purpose through pain, this episode will resonate with you. If you find value in this one, support the mission. Please kindly subscribe and leave a review. It helps the show grow, and that means that we can reach more men who are navigating that messy middle of growth and support them in becoming more self-led. Thank you so much. I'm Harrison, and this is the Growth Voyage Podcast. Enjoy. Okay, the red light is on. Matteo, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Harrison. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on, brother. And my first question out the gate, often on this podcast when we talk about becoming a man, where that journey starts is the moment where we start taking responsibility for our lives. So I want to know, what point in your life did you start to take responsibility? What events kind of led you to that state of mind?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I'll go to the beginning. Like, I went to an all-boys school in South Africa. I think anyone who's been to an all-boys school will know that it's not an easy place. Like, kids are quite innovative in the kind of criticisms they find about you, right? The bullying, if you call it. So I wouldn't say I had the most pleasant childhood, like from that perspective. But I think what it did teach me was like the resilience of like dealing with that, and actually made me, to be honest, like it made me a better person. I think it made me stronger. It also made me appreciate sort of certain friendships a lot more. And then obviously that put me in sort of decent standing for the rest of my early adulthood. And then kind of somewhat more recently, like exactly a year ago, I had a pretty traumatic experience with my dad passing. And, that culminated towards the end of last year, which was combined with a few other factors, which we can talk about as well. But stuff like, I've had issues with a very good friend. I fell out with them. Dealing with the grief of my dad. It was the first Christmas without him being there. Work was quite busy, and all of that culminated into something quite, I'd call it a breakdown, right? But yeah, I think that responsibility of becoming a man, all those have kind of factored into that, in the sense that, it teaches you certain values, like all those traumas, certain perspectives in life that I think have carried me forward in terms of how I believe what a man should be, right? I think because of all that experience, I know what a man shouldn't be. For example, the early sort of bullying at school, like, treating people with respect, having the decency to give people the time of day. Like, my fiance always jokes about, whenever we go to like a restaurant, I will just talk to people till the cows come home. She's like, listen, I just want a sandwich, right? But I'm in there for half an hour just talking to the chef, talking to anyone. And it's like, just giving people the decency and the time of day. I think this is irrespective of being a man. Like, I think this is just a human, right? Just like having that decency to sort of treat people with respect.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched upon something there. When we talk about these experiences when we're a child, I think it's very easy to say, oh, right, I'm this way because of this, or I think we have a tendency to focus on the negatives, whereas actually I think a lot of positives can come about from those same experiences, right? I mean, you've talked about resilience there, and also kind of teaching you to be a better man as well. So it seems to me like you had a bit of a guiding system in that way, and that kind of shaped you into kind of who you were later on. And yeah, you touched upon kind of this last year or so where everything kind of culminated. Did you find that was the first time where your life kind of really got hit with a ton of bricks? I mean, obviously you've described stuff happening earlier on, but it seemed like, right, that was kind of like I don't like to say natural pathway to you building like character traits and figuring out who you were and what your values were, which were quite valuable. But was that the first time where you were like, oh wow, okay, I can't, suddenly the resilience that I've built up, it can't even handle this?
I mean, I'll be honest, Harrison, that was the lowest I've been in my entire life. I mean, I have a friend of 15 years, and he saw me and he was like, I've literally never seen you that low. And my fiance as well was like, I was falling on the couch, almost every day at that period. And it was definitely the hardest point in my life. And I think we spoke about this briefly. It's like, mental health is very cyclical. Like, there doesn't necessarily have to be an external factor that results in you having that breakdown or that issue. It can very much be internal. This was obviously a combination of external factors, but I think I was also still dealing with the internal factors related to that early childhood. The issues that I experienced with the bullying, I still carry with me to this day. I've just learned how to deal with them, right? I still have issues around self-confidence, anxiety in sort of big spaces with large crowds, So I think you just learn how to cope with those traumas.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I think, as you suggested, and by the sounds of it, what happened is you kind of built up this resilience and you found a way through, but then still underlying there, the wounds are still there. It's just you were so good at kind of getting out of that initial period, and then I find that those kind of like manifest itself into our kind of outer reality. So before this, and I'm sure we'll dive into this past year, sounds like a very heavy period for you. Leading up to that, then, did you find that there were kind of signs that something was off? Was it always kind of like that? And what were your kind of go-to remedies, shall we say, or solutions to, maybe like lack of self-confidence or whatever was coming up for you? Was there something for you to do, or how were you kind of navigating that?
So I think the second part of that question, and this is why I think it's kind of made me a better person, those experiences, is this might sound extremely superficial, but it made me focus a lot on my physical appearance. And what I mean by that is like my health and like, my sort of passion in health and fitness right now, I would say, is largely related to that earlyhood trauma. And that's because I just kept wanting to better myself, because that bullying makes you so self-conscious, so critical of yourself. You can go one of two ways. You can accept that and then go down that negative path, or you can say, okay, well, let me not give them a reason to be critical of me. And the way I can do that is by improving myself. And I went down that route. So, a lot of my friends joke about the amount of exercise I do. I don't want to toot my own horn, but like, every day I'm doing some form of exercise, if that's weights, if it's CrossFit, if it's a long run or whatever it is. And if you want to unpack it, it's probably largely because of that earlyhood issues. Because like I'm so conscious of not giving people a reason to criticize me. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm never going to be perfect. No one's going to be perfect. Like, but if you can control what you can control, and for me, it was like improving myself in a physical perspective. There was that, but also mentally, I've done a lot of internal reflection during this whole process. You read a lot of literature, and just how you kind of essentially protect your peace. Like for example, we were talking about not having social media, largely related. Like social media, you only see the best of people's lives. You only see the best clips, and you see your algorithms just like these picture perfect people. And inevitably you start then criticizing yourself and like, oh shit, I'm not good enough. Look at this person. They got a 9-pack abs. They got, whatever, they can run a mile in 4 minutes. How come I can't do that? And so I just, honestly, the best thing for me was just getting rid of social media as well. There's all these internal and external sort of improvements I've been making to myself since then.
Yeah. Well, it definitely makes you think, isn't it? Like how can we kind of create our environment and curate it so it's best suited towards us and block out all the noise? But it's fascinating just hearing kind of your motivations for self-improvement, because I think that was quite a big mirror for me. Now I'm looking at it, it's like, what has led me to this place?
Yeah.
And it probably has been, like the bullying at school, and just being like, right, I'm just going to go to the gym. And then that way, right, it's funny, isn't it? How
it is funny. And like, there might be some people watching this or listen to this who disagree with that approach, but I think it's what works for you, right? I'm not saying if you've experienced what I've experienced to do this and you will automatically feel better. Of course not, right? But it worked for me. So you just got to find out what works for you. But, there was 2 options I was faced with at that time. It was like, do I go down this acceptance route where it's like, this is it, they're all right, I've got this problem or that problem, and just perpetually be depressed the rest of my life? Or you go down the other route?
Man, I mean, you talk about self-love and stuff, and there's kind of ways you can maybe, I don't know, start incorporating that into your own life and your self-talk and having more compassion for yourself. Although, I think one way in which you can start to build up that sense of self-worth is just by doing harder stuff and going deeper within yourself that way, right? And it's, again, we talk about kind of like the benefits of these experiences. I think they, as the original question alluded to, they kind of forge you as a man, right? Yeah.
And like you mentioned it before this, like the amazing stuff that you're doing with this, amazing stuff you're doing with jiu-jitsu and pro wrestling, like you're constantly putting yourself out there, right? And like, it's tiring. I hear you. Like, it's very tiring. But the experiences that give you can't put any price on that. Like these conversations that we're having, right? The experiences that you get with jiu-jitsu and wrestling, like the places that takes you. It's like you can't put a price on that. And that all makes you a better person, those experiences. What's that saying? Money can't buy experiences. I mean, it can, but like, I think those experiences, when you put yourself out there, that's what I'm always telling everyone, just like go outside of your comfort zone. Like my fiance, bless her, she's probably going to hate me for talking about this, but we went, it's very minor, but it's actually quite big when you think about it. It was, we went away recently, and it's a small thing. There was an opportunity to go swimming with sea lions, right? In this obviously enclosed area. And she was quite nervous about it, understandably, like it's a big animal that you're swimming with. And I kind of pushed her into, not, convince her to do it, and just say, push stuff out of your comfort zone, experience it. And like, as a result of that now, the sea lion was called Debbie. As a result of that now, whenever she's like nervous about doing something, just thinks to herself, like, what would Debbie do? And it's like, basically, just put yourself out of that comfort zone. She felt so good after doing it. And that's the thing, like, it's tiring. It's, doing all these, sort of pushing yourself, putting yourself out there and pushing yourself. But the benefit that you get from it is completely, in my opinion, like outweighs all of the kind of work that goes into doing that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great example. And yeah, you talk about the benefits, and for me, the benefit, like, it's not really to feel a certain way. Like, for me, that driving force that's kind of continuously pushing you to do better and achieve more, it's a kind of a blessing in a way, because I think eventually, and we'll definitely tie into this a bit later, I think there comes a point where I think you realize that achievement isn't going to make you happy per se. I think you'll get like a brief kind of like high, and then it kind of wears off. So for me, it's like that driving force we've discussed, that's helping me to just discover like what is my potential as a man. And that for me is really powerful, because we've got this shot at life. Why wouldn't you want to just see what you're capable of? It's not even about reaching a desired state, I don't think. I think it's like, right, how can we become the best version of ourselves? And that hunger and desire, would it still be there if we didn't have these experiences shaping us? But then I kind of want to draw it back to your story, because I think you've alluded to the idea that it has worked for you, this drive towards self-improvement. Although, do you think it's had a lasting impact on perhaps like self-perception, self-confidence, perhaps? You might mention a bit of social anxiety there. Is there kind of like limit for you? Like, what still kind of shows up for you now? And yeah, is there kind of like a limit, would you say, as to how much self-improvement can push you into that say desired state?
Yeah, no, I think like I was saying, I think the issue with people always sort of talk about acceptance, and I agree with that in principle, right? Accepting what's happened, you can't change the outcome, it's in the past, right? But I think it's easier said than done, and I think I will always carry these early and more recent traumas with me probably for the rest of my life. But it's just, I will become stronger at how I cope with them. And like I said earlier, mental health is very cyclical. Like, there might be a day where, for no reason at all, I will think back at a certain time, and that will cause me to, be anxious or to be depressed or whatever it is. But it's like acknowledging that, taking the time to acknowledge that is the most important part, that to realize that you're going through this. But then, with 20 years of experience now, coping with, those early issues, if you will, have given me a decent framework of how to sort of address them and manage them.
So you've kind of learned the tools, shall we say? Yeah.
I mean, I'm not perfect, as much as I can, yeah.
And does there come a point where, because I can certainly relate to this, where even though kind of day to day you'll have your tools to kind of deal with stuff that comes up, then some days it's just like, you just feel stuck.
Yeah, completely. I mean, just life happens, like shit happens. Like one day you wake up feeling like top of the world. The next day you wake up and you feel like the lowest you've ever been, and that's going to happen the rest of your life. But it's like, just again, acknowledging that and getting out of bed. It's the first step. Just get out of bed, like seize the day, sort of finding ways of coping with that work for you, whether that's therapy, whether that's exercise, whether that's journaling, whether that's gratitudes, whether that's cold plunges, just find something that works for you and keep going. That's the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned there just like getting out of bed, first thing. Has that been a struggle sometimes?
Fortunately not. Like I've never really had that. I mean, I've had issues around depression for sure in the past, but thankfully it's never been as bad as that, where I just don't want to get out of bed. And you hear stuff. I've got friends and colleagues who have been in that very dark place. But the conversations I've had on my other podcast as well, it's a lot of people say that's the first step, right? It's just literally getting out of bed. Once you've done that, the world is your oyster, right? You don't want to just stay in bed scrolling social media. It's not going to help. Definitely not going to help. Just get out of bed and put one step in front of the other and, just do what you can that day.
Yeah. Again, just wanted to touch upon this kind of breakdown moment then.
Yeah.
So I presume when this was all happening, the tools perhaps were there, or maybe they didn't work, or they weren't being prioritized. So talk to me about that shift then. So, you've had learned the tools previously and kind of learning how to manage the kind of symptoms that come up. So then what happened when this breakdown, was it just so big that all of this stuff just became absolute, I suppose? Or,
yeah. I mean, it was almost like it was the tools that I had were almost like for a completely different job. You know what I mean? That's like an analogy, because what happened, and I'll talk about it, like basically what happened was, my dad had been sick since 2016 pretty much. He was in and out of hospital. He had sort of cancer, stage 4 cancer. He had a series of strokes. He had heart attacks. And then we're not quite sure if it was an official diagnosis, but he was diagnosed with this thing called ataxia, right? Which is very deliberating. Not many people know about it. I've done a lot of charity fundraising for it since, but it's basically you start losing your core functions. Like, he was towards the end, he was in a wheelchair. He had early stage dementia, which I think was a correlation with the ataxia. No short-term memory. He couldn't really stand up by himself. He lost control of his bladder, but that was because of the cancer. So he had a whole series of issues towards, since 2016. And then in May last year, or end of April last year, they wanted to do an elective surgery on him to sort of help with things like his balance and maybe give him a bit more mobility. And it's a routine surgery, right? We were told it's a routine surgery. They do it all the time. 9 times out of 10, no problem. But of course, there's always a bit of a risk. And what they were doing was they were going to essentially put a shunt in his brain, which would, and then sort of like a sort of pipe, not a pipe, but something that comes down into his stomach, and it would drain the liquid constantly. Because apparently they were saying there was a buildup of liquid on his brain, which was causing this instability and all that. And again, it's a routine procedure. They do it quite a lot. And so he went in for the surgery. I was at work that day. I was going to leave work and because it was meant to be like an hour-long surgery, 2-hour surgery. And then my brother and my mum and I were going to go see him afterwards because it was meant to be like a pretty quick recovery. And so I leave work. He goes into surgery, no issue. I'm assuming everything's fine. I go to like the coffee shop near the hospital just to work a bit before he's out, expecting a call from my mum saying it's fine. And then like my mum just calls me out of the blue and says, the surgeon has called me and said that my dad had a stroke during the surgery. He's not reacting well and they have to go back in. And whenever you hear that for brain surgery, it's never a good thing, right? And so we're all nervous, and then we go and then we get there and we meet with a consultant, and he asks us it wasn't even a question. He was like, you have 2 options. Like we go back in or your dad dies, right? So you go back in, and what they mean by that is they'd done the surgery, what had happened, and then he hadn't reacted, he hadn't responded how a patient who's had that surgery should respond. Like he was, he wasn't really talking, he wasn't able to move his arms, couldn't open his eyes. And then they were like, okay, something's wrong here. And they looked into it more and they realized he had a stroke. So there was lots of blood in his brain. And so they had to go back in to fix that. So reopen his brain essentially to fix that. And so they went back in, but they said the chances of that, basically the damage, they're not quite sure how bad the damage was because of the stroke, and the fact that they have to go back in obviously adds a lot more additional complications. Anyway, I know I'm talking quite a lot here, but basically they went back in and then he didn't recover. He was on life support. He was in palliative care. And then my mum and my brother and myself and my aunts had to make a decision. Like, there was 2 options. One option was to keep him alive with a pipe in his mouth, like, just assisting his breathing and being fed through a tube. And, and bear in mind, my dad had very limited mobility and quality of life before that. It was, pretty much in a wheelchair, bedbound, couldn't do anything himself. And to make him even more, a worse quality of life, So you either keep him on life support, or in that situation, or you basically choose end of life. And to make that decision about your father is the most fucked up experience, excuse my language, like that any kid or anyone should have to go through. And so obviously we, as a family, we decided he would not appreciate that quality of life, like with a tube in his mouth the whole time. And, so we opted for end of life. And that was their advice. The medical advice was it's more humane to go down the end of life route. And they basically said, because of the level of oxygen my dad was on with the pipe in his mouth, as soon as they take it out, they expected within a few hours he'd pass away. He was on the highest level of assisted oxygen. But my dad, being who he was, he ended up lasting like a week longer without any food, any oxygen. But the reason I'm saying that is because there was these multiple moments where you kind of think your dad is going to die and having to cope with that, where it's firstly when he had the botched surgery or the stroke during the surgery, I think he's going to die there. Then when they're taking out the tube, you think, right, he's only got 2 hours left, you make your peace. But then you're coming back every day and seeing him gradually deteriorate. That was so tough. Yeah, there was this moment during that period where I still have vivid memories of it every day where, because he was in ICU, you can't, only a certain amount of people can come into the ward at a time. And I went in by myself, and this was like right after the surgery when he still had the tube in and he had a bandage, everything. And I remember walking in and like he wasn't very conscious, but his one eye like kind of opened slightly and he looked at me and he kind of put his hand up, almost like grabbed my hand. And I've spoken to so many therapists about this and so many people, but like my dad was afraid of death, right? And in my family, I was always the person to help my dad. My dad would always call me if he needed help with something. And for me, like when he put his hand up, it was just like, help me, like I'm scared, help me. And for me, that's, whenever I think about that, I just get so emotional because it's like, there's nothing I could do to help him in that situation, And, you speak to doctors, you speak to therapists and they say, well, he's not conscious, he doesn't know what he was doing. But it's like, I disagree. Like, I think he knew what he was doing. Like, because he wasn't putting his arm up to anyone. It was like, when I came in, like he was, other than that, he was quite sedentary. He wasn't moving much. And I don't know, that really kind of still hits hard. It's like knowing like, didn't help him. And then there was that in May, and then with that whole experience, and then work was extremely busy. There was an event going on at the time that was quite intense, literally that month. So I was trying to manage that as well. And I spoke about it on other instances where like one day I was sitting at my dad's bedside when he was on palliative care with my laptop on my lap, responding to Slack messages, like, work messages, and just looking at my dad and being like, what the hell am I doing? Like the mind fuck, the change in perspective of just seeing someone at death's door and you're here responding to such trivial questions that in the end don't matter, right? Like, oh, send me this document, or where's this document, or like update this spreadsheet. It's like, but someone's literally there on death. That's what matters. I think I just didn't want to accept what was happening. I was trying to like immerse myself in a distraction, being work. And yeah, so that was busy as well. And then I had this massive fallout with a very, very, very close friend of mine, which was over completely trivial reasons in the end. But yeah, and that all culminated to December just being shit. And I know I spoke for probably a better half of like 15 minutes there, but yeah, that's basically where the breakdown was. And the way I coped with it was going back to my earlier points about, how I coped with my earlyhood trauma was I just immersed myself in exercise. For me, exercise is my therapy. It's my meditation. I would just go to the most brutal HIIT classes, the most aggressive CrossFit classes. I would run 15 to 20 Ks like 2-3 days. That was just chasing the endorphins. I think that's what it was. Just chasing the high that made me forget about what was currently going on. Lot to unpack there.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot to unpack, and yeah, I can imagine the challenging part was kind of the shock to it as well, right? Like not really having time to prepare, and then as you were kind of alluding to there, like not actually know, oh, okay, right, this is it, and then it happens, and it's such a fundamental figure in someone's life, and it sounds to me like you were kind of like taking on a lot of almost like responsibility for like his life in a way, and so I can imagine when you've kind of formed that perception, it's difficult to accept that you couldn't do anything, and all the emotions that kind of come out of that. I think those are the types of experiences which just won't ever leave you, right? No, like there's an imprint there.
100%. And the sad reality is that we all go, I mean, God willing, nobody has a traumatic experience like where, that subsequent event with my dad, but everyone's going to lose a parent at some point, right? And it's an extremely traumatic process because, like you said, it's someone who's such a big part of your life, right? And we're a close family. Like my dad was very much, very much there, very much present. Like he was quite a commanding part of the family, and then him to be gone, just a complete, mind shift. But like I think I mentioned earlier on in that story was the tools that I had. So part of the tools that I had with growing up with the, dealing with the early childhood trauma was, exercise and improving myself physically. And I mentioned there that like, that was one coping mechanism that I had when dealing with the issues in December. But, you can't put on par like childhood bullying and losing your dad, right? So it was like the tool set that I had for childhood bullying wasn't necessarily fit for purpose with dealing with that level of trauma, right? And so when, dealing with my dad, I'm a huge advocate of therapy. I think everyone should have a therapist or someone that they can talk to, and so I had, prior to losing my dad, I hadn't subscribed to that way of thinking. I didn't necessarily see the point in a therapist. We can get me talking about self-help books as well. I don't necessarily subscribe to self-help books, but after I saw what happened to my dad, I was like, this is something needs to change. I need to speak to someone professional like about this. And I saw a therapist for quite a while, and that was extremely beneficial. And I want to get to a point where I continue seeing a therapist once a month, just even if I'm having a great month. But I think it's just so important to have that outlet, someone who has the is completely unbiased, has a professional experience, knows how to cope with these situations. I think it's so powerful to have someone like that.
Yeah, it's massive. It's massive. I always say, it doesn't matter, as you're alluding to, it doesn't matter what period of life you're kind of navigating, having that setting is, it can be priceless if it's the right person. And by the sounds of it, it was the right person. That for me is taking responsibility for your life, how you're feeling, right? Like enormous amounts of grief, and okay, yes, let's feel it, and then right, how are we going to process it? Because it's easy to bury your head in the sand, of course it is, but I think it shows, it's a testament to your character. It's like, no, I'm going to do something about this. I need support, and I think that's one of the strongest things you can do as a man. Yeah.
It's honestly just the first step is just acknowledging that you're going through that, because then you can start putting together a plan how to cope with it. Because many people, for example, even burnout, right? Burnout at work. People burn out because they don't necessarily acknowledge, because if you acknowledge that you are close to burnout, unless there's some sort of other reason for it, typically you will change what you're doing to avoid burning out, right? But a lot of people don't acknowledge it. And I think it's the same thing with breakdowns as well. It's like, if you acknowledge that you're going through a breakdown, you can then look at perhaps what's causing that breakdown and make the relevant changes but also you can seek help or make changes to your life or potentially prevent that breakdown from happening. And for me, it was like, after my dad, I knew I was going in one direction. Similar with the criticisms from childhood and high school. Like there was two options, like I mentioned, there was two routes to take. With my dad, it was the same thing. Like, do I just go down this dark path of like regret and could I have done more and like, you know, whatever, or do I go down this other route of acceptance, but, you know, finding ways of coping with it in a sustainable way, and that was the route I chose.
What were the ways you were kind of coping with it? You mentioned sustainable way, like unsustainable way, would you say? I mean, you mentioned work there, like that visual is pretty astounding, isn't it? And yeah, obviously seemed like it was a way not to deal with that, but then even just that visual is kind of quite an accurate representation of like the world we live in, right? Yeah.
I mean, the other ways were, I mean, I hate to say it, but like I'd be going out quite a lot, you know, like probably having too much to drink, you know, because that was like an escape. And yeah, I think also a lot of the time just being, one thing I was very conscious was is I became very negative. Like I think I assumed like a sort of victim mentality where like this has only happened to me, like why me, you know? And I became quite negative, and I became quite tough on my friends and my family and my partner. Like no one wants to be around a grey cloud 24/7, right? So I was very conscious of that as well. And so I just realized I had to make those changes. Like, you know, going down this, finding these kind of superficial, you know, coping mechanisms, like going out and immersing myself in work, or, you know, burning the candle at both ends, right? You know, working hard or getting up early to do a tough gym session, working really hard at work, and then maybe going out with friends. You know, it's like that wasn't sustainable at all, right? And so rather than just dealing with the symptoms, like what was the cause? And then I realized what the cause was, and then I sought out therapy, and that helped me unpack how to deal with that cause.
Yeah, and yeah, you mentioned there, like the negativity, the anger, like these are all going to be manifestations of unprocessed grief.
Yeah.
I suppose, it's similar to, in terms of grief as well, I only realized through therapy myself that there was a lot of unprocessed grief, you know, from like years ago that I hadn't even like thought about. So yeah, I definitely echo that, you know. I think
and even if it's just conversations like this, like having a friend that you're like comfortable to open up with. If it's serious, obviously seek professional help. But like day to day, I think having, you know, a community around you of people that are like willing to listen, and, you know, they don't necessarily have to provide advice, just listen. Like that is so powerful. Yeah. You know, because I've always said a problem shared is a problem halved, right? So true.
Well, it's like finding your kind of safe people, and man, I find it with the wrestling community as well. Like I remember there was one time on a show where I was just like not really feeling it, and I was just like very much keeping myself to myself, just kind of in my own zone. And yeah, like I can easily say to people like, yeah, just not really feeling up for it. He's like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, we're all, yeah, me too. Yeah. There's just like, yeah, it's just, that's whatever. Like there's no masks, there's no performance. It's just like, yeah, you know.
Do you find jiu-jitsu as like your kind of meditation or your therapy almost?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was interesting. You kind of alluded to the idea of like exercise there and how it's almost like an escape, really. It's like running away from your problems. I think I don't know, it's an interesting one to me. Like I just love it so much. So could you say it's a form of therapy? Potentially. I also just do think we need to be moving our body and we need to be active. But yeah, I was telling you today, it's like my favorite way to kind of start a morning, and it's very grounding for me, and again teaches a lot about life and resilience and stuff as well. But you mentioned something there too about like your friendship kind of deteriorating as well, and it sounded like that happened shortly after, right?
Yeah.
And 13 13 years you were together? Or?
Oh no, this was separate. This was a different person. This was like I knew this person for about 4 years.
Yeah, I said together as well, but I think
no, yeah, this was just a very, very good friend. And we fell out for various reasons. But it's just that was tough because it was someone that you saw quite often and had a very good relationship with, like a very good friendship with, very similar people. And to suddenly not have that person in your life, first of all, after losing a dad, right, who's no longer in your life, and then you have an extremely good friend who's no longer in your life as well, it's just like pretty intense. And just the fact that it all culminated so close together was just a lot to deal with.
Yeah, well, I think I'm keen to explore this, right? Because I think it does take place, right, in life, and I mean, you said like, very good friend, extremely good friend, and I think when you suddenly don't have that person to liaise with anymore, you fall out. I think there is a kind of like a feeling that brings up, right? Like, what feelings did that bring up for you?
Definitely sadness and like remorse, because it was almost like it was a sense of loss. Honestly, it was like, not nowhere near as like sort of considerable as losing my dad, but like, perhaps somewhat similar in the sense it was like this big person in your life is no longer there, right? And you find yourself just dwelling quite a lot on the past with that person. And I did a lot of research around this as well. It's like when you're missing someone, are you missing the idea of them? Are you missing how they made you feel at that time? Or are you missing genuinely them as a person, right? I'm like, I don't know. This person was like, we're extremely similar in so many ways. And just a very good like friendship. And it was just it was very sad. I felt really sad was the word. And it was very tough on my fiance as well because, again, I was being a negative Nancy the whole day, like not exactly a bright ray of sunshine. But yeah, I through the therapy, through the other stuff that I was doing, kind of found a way of dealing with it. And
yeah. Well, I think a lot of this stuff, friendships, again, it does affect us deeply, but we don't really process it. I mean, the amount I can relate to that. I mean, the same people sometimes pop into my head, and I haven't spoken to them for a couple of years, and sometimes we didn't even have an official like
end.
Yeah. It sounded like you did.
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
but then I think for a lot of mine, we never actually had an official end. We kind of just
grew apart.
Yeah, so it makes me think, are there some conversations?
Would you reach out to them again? Like, are you better for them not being in your life, or?
I just think we're on kind of different paths. But it's an interesting mirror for me because I'm thinking, would I like a conversation? I think that'd be nice. I think now that and I think there's a part of those friendships that I haven't really processed or like felt. I don't even like to say grief because it, but yeah, you kind of don't really reflect on it. So I think it's not something where I think, oh yeah, like I'd love to be friends with this person again, necessarily, because I can see how we kind of have different values and different goals and ambitions. And I think especially when you're building something, you want to be surrounded by people on a similar wavelength. At the same time, would I be up for a coffee or something like that? I think, yeah, potentially. So it's something for me to think about. Like if it does crop up again, then maybe it's because I think it's those conversations you don't end up like regretting not having them, right?
Exactly, and that's like, so me and this friend, we're back in communication now. Like we don't see each other nearly as much as we used to. We don't talk nearly as much as we used to. But what happened is in sort of 3-4 months later, so sort of early beginning of this year, kind of what you were saying, I realized, listen, life's too short, right? like we fell out in hindsight for stupid reasons, right? In the greater scheme of things. And it's like, this person brought a lot of joy to my life. I would like to have them in my life in one capacity or another. And so I just extended, whatever the saying, extended a leaf, whatever it is. I reached out. And yeah, we're talking again now. But no, we're not, I wouldn't say we're as close as we used to be. But, I would just, life is too short in the sense that I don't harbor grudges on people. I don't think it's healthy to do that. And, I just wanted to have that, because we ended quite abruptly. Our friendship ended very abruptly. And so just wanted to have more of that dialogue to talk it through.
It's amicable.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, and it works. Like, we're still briefly in communication.
Well, I imagine it came across as quite a shock, if you haven't had that type of falling out with a person before. So I don't know, like, did you kind of reflect back on, like, maybe there were signs that this relationship was no longer aligned, or were there kind of signs that, okay, there was a bit of a mismatch there?
In hindsight, yeah, there were a few signs. In hindsight, there were a few signs, but I think at that point, like, you were just so happy in that friendship that you kind of neglected perhaps the red flags, if you will. And then I think the state of mind that I was in after my dad made me reflect on quite a lot, and that kind of brought things out. And then had this big conversation where we just decided, like, okay, this friendship's not really going anywhere. It's like, it's not conducive to both of us. And then cut ties. And then, yeah, but then since like 3 months later, 4 months later, once I was, I had the whole Christmas period when I was with my mum and my brother, just two of us, had a lot of time to reflect, did a lot of journaling, did a lot of meditation, a lot of soul searching, a lot of podcasts similar to this one. And, yeah, it just made me realize that, again, life's too short. Like, I'm not going to harbor grudges. Like, I'm just going to think of the positive. My mantra in life has always been assume good intent, like, in anything, until someone over and over again sort of, does something against you. But, like, it's always been assume good intent. And so when we had that disagreement with my friend, like, I'm just going to assume she came from a good place. Right. And yeah. So then all that meant that I reached out eventually, and I was like, listen, life's too short. Hope you're doing well. It'd be good to grab a coffee sometime. Grabbed the coffee. And I said, we're now, sort of speaking every now and then, just touching base.
Yeah, I mean, that's a wicked example of kind of leading yourself. And I think what stood out to me was, like, it was your father's passing that kind of made you start questioning stuff a bit more. It kind of like that gave you like that wake up to go, oh, actually, do you know what? I haven't got time for this anymore. Like, and I think there's it's, I don't know if, like, yeah, blessing is the right word here, but certainly some silver linings or like perspective shifts that take place as a result of really painful experiences. And yeah, it sounds to me like I kind of like jolted you a bit to go, do you know what? Like, that state of mind, it's like, I haven't got time for any of this, or like, I'm going to do something about this. And I think there is something quite powerful about that, kind of using these experiences to, shape, continue to refine your, like, value system and the way you see the world. I think there's like, and it come, and like, to me, and this is still a relatively recent experience, right? Like, this is again, like, forging like a different, I don't know, like, beast, if you will, like the way I see it, like, because you were already kind of like building up resilience and all this stuff before, and then you build up tools for that. Now you've gone through this experience, and I mean, what a journey that is, and building up the tools. And again, it's through these experiences where we're able to, like, see life differently. And so even though at the time and even now, it's like, how could you possibly understand this or comprehend what's going on? from a kind of spiritual journey perspective, it's quite a powerful thing taking place.
Really?
And it's, I guess that is what life is really. I mean, we're here to experience the depths of emotions, and sounds like you've been through just that.
And I think honestly, like my brother's a Buddhist, and he I'm probably gonna get so much shit for butchering this, but there's so much. There's a sort of a train of thought in Buddhism where it's you basically train your mind to accept that everyone you love is gonna die, and I think a reason for that is because you appreciate that time with them a lot more, right? And I was speaking to a friend on the way here, and he had a seriously traumatic event that happened to him 5-6 years ago. And he's been on a hell of a journey since then. And he's in a much better place now. But a big learning for him was something similar, was that everyone dies, right? And like for him, acknowledging that, which sounds trivial because obviously everyone knows everyone dies, right? That's one of the death and taxes are the two most like certainties in life, right? But genuinely acknowledging that has given him a whole new appreciation, firstly, of the time that he does have with the people that he has and being very conscious about who he spends that time with. But also that not to get too stressed out about trivial things because, again, they are trivial. Like in the end, it does not matter, right? It really doesn't matter. There's a social media channel that I follow, and it's essentially this guy that goes around to hospices and he talks to those people that are, towards the end of their life. And he says, like, what's the bit of wisdom that you would share to the younger generation, right? You're at this point in your life, and it's amazing stuff that they say, for example, like just things that you take for granted, like smile more, think more positively, don't sweat the small stuff, like, and, don't stress about not getting to when you're on your deathbed, you're not going to think, I'm so happy I made it to the office at 9 a.m. every day. You know what I mean? Like, and experience life. Like life is there to be experienced. And I think this, my dad's passing taught me the mortality of, we're all going to die at some point, right? How temporary our time is on this earth. And just to maximize that time, like you were saying earlier, like, what can you achieve in this time that you have on earth? And that was a big catalyst for my podcast as well. It was like, I've been talking about doing it for ages. I've always been having an excuse for not doing it. And then this happened, and I was like, you know what? There's no time like the present. There's no guarantee that I'll be here tomorrow. Like, let me just do what I can now. And, we started the podcast, and I just think I'm such an advocate of everyone having that one thing on the side that gives them purpose. Because if you immerse yourself in work 9 to 5 all the time, that's all you do, you live and breathe that. Like, you need that exterior passion project, whatever that looks like to you, but something that gives you that additional drive. It's so important.
Yeah, it wakes you up, man. And it's interesting that, again, coming back to that experience, it's kind of pushed you to, pursue your passion, make something happen. Yeah. And man, it's a wonderful podcast and energy that you've created there. We'll certainly dive into that near the end, because I think it's awesome. And I think you're a great example of someone who's take responsibility for his own healing and experiences, and form the man you are today, which I think is really cool.
Likewise. No, I think it's important. And the stuff that we're doing here, just like getting men to open up and talk, I think that's so important.
It's normalizing the conversation. Yeah.
That's where the growth happens.
Yeah. 100%, man. What we'll do, we'll dive into the closing traditions of the podcast. So the first two are routine. They're asked every week.
Okay.
Third one is asked by a member of the Growth Voyage community.
Okay.
First one, nice and simple. It's a song recommendation.
So I get a lot of grief for this, but I've been listening to it on like repeat for the past 3 weeks. It's called Dear Maria by All Time Low. I went through an emo phase when I was growing up. I haven't quite lost it. But yeah, people like My Chemical Romance, All Time Low, The list goes on, like Green Day, Sum 41, Blink-182, all that. Like they gave me a lot of, that was kind of my tribe. When I was going through the trauma in early childhood with the bullying and all that, I found my tribe, and my tribe was this group of people that liked this type of music. And my best friend now is still from that group. And so we have, but yeah, the song that I've been progressing back to in recent years is Dear Maria by All Time Low.
Okay.
Yeah, check it out. It's a banger, absolute banger.
Wicked. Well, we'll put it in the description.
Yeah.
I look forward to checking it out. Love the backstory as well. Brilliant. You mentioned self-help books before. Perhaps you changed your relationship with them over time. The second one is a book recommendation.
Probably a series of books. So I've been eating them up. Like, I think I've read the first all 4. Well, I think there's 6 in the series. I've read 4 in the past, like 2 months, 3 months. The author is Robert. I'm gonna get his surname wrong. Robert Galbraith, and it's actually J.K. Rowling. So he wrote Harry Potter, but she wrote under a pseudonym, Robert Galbraith, and I'm not outing her here. Everyone knows now it was her, but she's kept writing under that name, and it's essentially a crime series. It's this detective called Cormoran Strike and his partner Robin, and it's just a crime thriller. Each book is a new crime that he's a detective that he investigates, and they've actually made a BBC series off the back of it. So if you don't want to read the book, watch the series. They're really good. But yeah, the book that I'm reading now the version is True Blood. That's the name of that book. But there's, like I said, there's a series of 6. But Robert Galbraith, Cormoran Strike, check it out.
Okay, wicked. I wonder why she has is that to
just test herself again? Because if she writes anything under J.K. Rowling, I think everyone's going to eat it up, right? Because it's like, Harry Potter, famous author. Maybe she just wanted to test herself. You know what I mean? Like, try from the beginning, a completely unknown person. Like, see if she can sort of replicate her success again. But then apparently the story is that I think someone had a lot of free time on their hands, and they did like a direct comparison of the writing styles of Harry Potter and this other book, and then they put 2 and 2 together, and then eventually she had to like own up to it, and it was
oh really?
Yeah, but she still writes under that pseudonym, but everyone knows it's her.
Interesting. Well, you learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Didn't know that. Okay, yeah, we'll put these in there, and the final question. It's actually quite fitting for this episode, actually, but it came in from Richie, and he asked, how have you mastered the art of letting go?
Still working on it. I think I have a tendency to dwell on the past, right? And I read, again, I'm going to butcher this probably, but I read a quote from the Dalai Lama, which is people are so busy sort of thinking about the past and worrying about the future, they don't live in the present, right? And I keep telling myself that, and that helps me let go at times. It's like thinking about the past. I mean, the past is done, right? You're not going to change the outcome, right? There's genuinely no point thinking back, and dwelling over that. So I wouldn't say I have mastered it. I think I'm trying to. But like I'm also, and the way I'm trying to do that is just by being very, very conscious of just living in the present, right? The present moment. There's no point focusing about future because that hasn't happened yet, right? And then you can't change the past. So just focus on what you can control, and that is the present. And I keep telling myself that, and that's how I hopefully will learn to let go eventually.
Well, that's the work, really, isn't it? And I think it requires us to kind of be constantly shifting those thoughts and just having that awareness of going, right, okay, let's switch it over. Were there certain tools? Did they dive into this sort of stuff when you're talking about grief and like processing these challenges? Was there an element of kind of mindfulness there, or was it more about like just processing emotions for you during that time?
I think it was more like, it was definitely more processing the emotions, not, like I said earlier, acknowledging that they were there. But then that kind of does feed into sort of mindfulness and letting go. And yes, the two kind of go hand in hand. There was a combination of both through the therapy. I did traditional therapy. I also did like CBT as well. Basically tried everything to see what would help. And I think CBT is very powerful. The cognitive behavioral therapy. I think it's very, very, very powerful because, again, it helps you, it teaches you to sort of acknowledge when you're sort of being triggered, or acknowledging when there's a trigger, and then addressing it and nipping it in the bud there rather than letting it linger. So that's the whole like mindset shift, big time. But the TLDR of CBT, from what I understand, is that's kind of, you acknowledge straight away the trigger, you deal with it, and then the idea is that it doesn't like fester and become worse and worse.
Oh, it's such a powerful modality, man. Yeah, that's awesome.
But I mean, I'm still learning, right? I'm by no means have I mastered it, right? But
well, I think it's a constant becoming. I think you can. Yeah, it's just a constant journey, right? And I think for me, sometimes you can be a master or an expert, but sometimes that's just being maybe like one step ahead of somebody else sometimes, because you've kind of lived that experience and you're gaining the skills. So while you might not necessarily be a master to someone who's been doing it for 20 years, to someone who hasn't experienced it yet, you could very well be, right? Because it's like a new language, a new field. So
true.
Yeah, it'll be awesome to keep on hearing more about your journey, man, as time goes on. Yeah, really appreciate you opening up, going so in depth about your experiences, man. Yeah, really, really powerful experiences. A lot of challenges, and yeah, I can see how it's all kind of like shaped you into like who you are today. So yeah, just big thank you to you for
thanks for having me.
Yeah, being so open, man.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, very, very welcome. Very, very easy to listen to, I found as well. Which makes sense, seeing as you're a podcast host yourself. So yeah, I mean, where can people kind of find out more about what you're doing, and yeah, what is it all about?
Yeah. So yeah, we run a similar podcast. It's called the Council of Men with an S. So COUNSEL, so the advice of men. And it's basically, the premise is, it's just a bunch of mates getting together in an unscripted way just to talk about issues that many men face and don't necessarily talk about. And we've always said that like men's mental health is definitely getting the attention it deserves. Like it's definitely heading in the right direction. Like people are quite conscious of, being more open, but there's definitely a long way to go. And so we're hoping to play our part in that. And we've always said if we can just help one person feel a little less alone, then that's great. And, we're not therapists, none of us, like we're all in different walks of life. But when things get serious, we bring in professionals like yourself. You've joined us. We bring in other subject matter experts. We've spoken to bands. We've spoken to some therapists. I know you had Josh on here as well. He's a hypnotherapist? No.
Yes, hypnotherapist. Yeah.
We've had him on as well. We've had several other people, but and we have some interesting people in the pipeline as well. But yeah, if you want to check it out, it's Council of Men with an S.
Yeah, I'll put the links in the description. Yeah, wicked pod. I certainly felt the energy when I was on there, and yeah, I'm really excited to see where that is as well.
Likewise, yeah.
Yeah, Matteo, thank you so much, brother.
Thanks, Harrison.